Hello, good afternoon. If you're watching this live, hello simply if you're watching it at some other time. This is the Salisbury Cathedral reflection for Wednesday, the 2nd of December. And I'm Robert Titley, the Cathedral's Canon Treasurer. Earlier today, we had the privilege of broadcasting to the nation and indeed beyond the nation as BBC Radio 3's choral evensong came from here, Salisbury Cathedral. A wonderful day on which to have that privilege, the day on which we prepare once more to welcome people for public worship and to visit the cathedral at the end of the English lockdown, and also on the day when a vaccine has been approved for use in the UK. It's a day of bad news as well, and that featured in the prayers which Dean Nick offered at the end of Evensong. It's been an awful time for business, and some businesses have gone under altogether. We think of Sir Philip Green's Arcadia Group and also Debenhams, a company which can trace its origins back as far as 1778. I've said before in these reflections that the effect, or one effect, of the coronavirus has been that of an acid bath in which our society and its various forms and its institutions have been plunged in and taken out and plunged in again. And each time we've seen what's left, what's been laid bare, what's been burned away altogether. And these companies that have suffered so badly, they've not lacked for critics who've talked about how, whether it's Topshop or Debenhams, failed to respond to the shifts in high street retail and the harsh climate in which that business has to be done. And the church itself has not lacked for its COVID critics either. On Sunday, Dean Nick, in his sermon, touched on one of these critics, Tim Stanley, who wrote an article in the Telegraph newspaper last week. The headline, you can still read it on the Telegraph website. The headline is, "A dying Church of England cannot afford a sabbatical." The headline was occasioned by an announcement last week that Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, is going to take a sabbatical, a study break, next summer. Now, being Archbishop of Canterbury is to have one of the three hardest jobs in this country. The other two are that of Prime Minister and that of manager of the England football team. And an unwritten part of each of those three job descriptions is that sometimes your role is simply to be a public human punch bag for people to work out their frustrations on. Though Tim Stanley's article is broader in its focus and a little bit more considered than that, because he is worried, and he seems genuinely concerned, that the Church of England, like Debenhams, is going to go under. We are in, he says in the article, a national crisis, and it is a crisis about death. And that, he says, ought to be our big moment in the church. I'll read you a little bit of the article. He says, the central message of Christianity is that while death is bad, it's not the end. Jesus lived, he died, he rose again. This, Christians believe, is a historical fact, and it's this outrageous claim that converted much of the world to Christ. He goes on to say, the Church of England hierarchy does spread the good news, but he thinks it does so quietly and thinly. Now, I'm not going to attempt a point-by-point analysis of Tim Stanley's article. It's a punchy piece of writing, it's worth reading. Some of it's penetrating, and some of it, I think, isn't. There are 2 points that I do want to talk about. One is his preoccupation with death and getting through death to the other side as the central message of Christianity. And I'm going to pick that up on Friday because I have the privilege of offering 2 reflections this week. And Friday, the day on which we especially commemorate the death of Jesus on Good Friday, seems to be the moment to do that. For now, I want to talk about a second point from this article, which is his preoccupation with hierarchy, specifically the church hierarchy. It gets 3 mentions by name in his article, and it really is the thread running through all that he writes. Now, hierarchy is not a word we tend to use very much in the Church of England. It's a more Roman Catholic term, and Stanley himself is a Catholic, and I'm glad to say a practicing Catholic, and that gives a certain kind of authority to the analysis that he offers. But the Church of England, sure as anything, has a hierarchy, so I'm very happy to work with that term. But in his article, he says much about the hierarchy, and he says nothing about the local church. And it reminds me of some words of Jonathan Swift, Anglican cleric, but also a critic of society around him. And he's even older than Debenhams. He died in the mid-1700s. And he offered this thought about the society of which he was part. He said, "It is the folly of too many to mistake the echo of a London coffee house for the voice of the kingdom." He must have felt that keenly because he was from Dublin. Similarly, I think it is a danger to mistake the pronouncements of the hierarchy, whether it's bishops, archbishops, or even, yes, the musings of a canon in a cathedral close, though we're rather more lowerarchy than hierarchy. It is an error to mistake those voices for the voice of the church, of the whole people of God. The public voice, even the national voice, that is, it matters. It sometimes matters vitally, but it's only part. It's only, as it were, one line in a much richer harmony. The Prime Minister's discovered this week how limited his power is without the support of the foot soldiers on his backbenches. Gareth Southgate would tell you how his power drains away as soon as his team gets onto the pitch. So, the church hierarchy, the hierarchy of any church, is as nothing apart from the faith as it is lived out in every postcode of a nation. Think, for instance, of a church near you. You may be watching and listening to this near to where I'm speaking from, so your local church might be the cathedral. But I know we have some people, it's wonderful, very, very far away from here. So think about the church in your locality, your town, your village, the neighbourhood of your city where you live, and think, what will make you start going to that church or go back to it now the lockdown is over, or to be involved in its life, perhaps through online worship? Or if you are already involved, what keeps you involved? Is it an archbishop's inspiring words on Thought for the Day or Pause for Thought, depending on your tastes of radio during the day? Is it even the beauty of word and music broadcast from a distant cathedral? Or is it more likely to be your memory of how the vicar took your neighbour's funeral a few months ago? Or your experience of that person who lives over the road who goes to church and there's something about her life that doesn't quite add up, doesn't quite make sense, unless this stuff is true, unless God is real. The Church of God rather puts me in mind of the man whose death we marked a few days ago, a man who claimed to be in touch with the hand of God, the late and flawed genius Diego Maradona. Both he and the church have something in common. Both are blessed with a low centre of gravity. That makes each of them hard to control. Ask any defender, ask any bishop. But it makes both of them really quite hard to knock over. I'm going to end with some very famous words of the 16th century Saint Teresa of Avila. In these words, she talks about how the risen Jesus is known, can be experienced, but how the risen Jesus is present and active intensely locally and intensely personally through the lives of those who are his followers, his disciples. You and me, or potentially so. Teresa said, "Christ has no body now, but yours. No hands, no feet on earth, but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks with compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands through which he blesses all the world. Yours the hands, yours the feet, yours the eyes. You are his body." Thank you very much for your time. Blessings for this season of Advent, and now and always, may God be with you.